give it another minute or just jump right in? Yeah. We'll get rolling here. Okay. I am going to go ahead and put everybody on mute. Looks like, Joe, you just did that, so we're good to go. Appreciate everybody joining me this evening. Tonight's topic will be an interesting one for sure, and I think is going to spark some questions at the end or in the middle or at any point in time. I appreciate everybody joining. My name is Jonathan Agan, and this is the Advocacy and Caregiver Group 101. Tonight's topic, certainty in an uncertain climate, protecting yourself and your care. No matter where you're at, no matter what you're doing, if you turn on the news, turn on your computer, then you know that there is a lot of uncertainty in terms of healthcare, insurance, you name it. It is up in the air, or at least that's what it's being made to seem. So tonight we're going to go through what is uncertain, what does it all mean, what to do, and considerations, anything we haven't spoken about, and we're going to take some questions. I'm going to try and go through everything pretty quickly so that we can leave time for discussion at the end. But if there is something during the course of the presentation that I'm not touching upon, or you have a burning question, then try and signal me, and I'll try and take a question right then and there. So let's jump right in. What is uncertain? Well, what isn't uncertain past January 20th? So let me back up a little here. Regardless of where you fall upon the political spectrum, whether or not you are a Republican, a Democrat, independent, conservative, liberal, it doesn't matter at this point, because healthcare is something that we all need, whether or not it's yourself or whether or not it's a loved one. It doesn't matter. At some point in time, we're all going to need to visit a doctor, and God forbid you may be diagnosed with a serious or life-threatening condition, cancer, or a terminal condition, or a condition that could be taken care of with experimental treatments, but if you don't have the right access to care, don't have the right insurance, then you're going to be fighting an uphill battle. So with that in mind, moving into last Friday, the January 20th, the inauguration, there was a lot that hung in the balance as people wondered whether or not the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare, was going to continue on. And if not, what would happen? Well, the promises that were made by the Republican Party to repeal the Affordable Care Act, that seems to be winding its way through Congress right now. What happens beyond that, nobody really knows. It's being done right now without any type of a plan, which is rather scary. And some of the key parts of the Affordable Care Act, which impact upon disease populations, people with cancer, children with pre-existing conditions, adults with pre-existing conditions. Those provisions thus far are going to be eliminated. And we keep hearing that there will be a new plan submitted and there'll be fixes. Well, the problem is that's not happening. And at least by one account, by the end of the near term, if it's completely repealed, and this is by the Congressional Budget Office, around 18 million people in this country are going to lose coverage as a result of it being repealed. So regardless of whether or not you are for it or against it, it doesn't matter. If it goes away, the damage is going to be done, and any piece of legislation that's enacted to try and repair the damage or try and fix it may be too late. Insurance companies work on what are known as actuary tables, and they assess risk. So if you have a pre-existing condition and you were insured pursuant to the Affordable Care Act, and you were able to get into one of the government pools, and that's done away with, and you lose your coverage, trying to get private care with a pre-existing condition is going to be near impossible financially or just in general, because they're not going to insure you, because they're not going to take the risk based upon the fact that you are going to need ongoing care. So where it stands, nobody really knows. I've been trying to do as much reading as possible, and I'll be honest with you. I know as much probably as you guys know, or as my 3-year-old knows. And that's a concern, that we have an administration that isn't telling us what's going to happen. There are some that think that they're going to turn over Medicare and Medicaid to the states and allow them to spend the money how they want to. And within that rhetoric, there are some that are saying that if a state wants to maintain the Affordable Care Act and the policies and the coverage provided pursuant to the Affordable Care Act, then that's the state's business and they can do that. Okay, well, that provides some level of protection, possibly. And then I've seen reports that various bits and pieces of the Affordable Care Act won't be taken away, like the pre-existing condition exclusion. So I don't think anybody knows. I have some people up on the Hill that I trust in terms of filtering information to me on both sides of the aisle. And, as much as there's very fast movement to try and repeal it, there's also a segment of Democrats and Republicans that understand that you actually have to think before you act and are trying to slow things down. So nobody knows. Possible replacements. I just talked a little bit about the transition of the monies and the revenues back to the states so they can make decisions in terms of what provisions of the Affordable Care Act to keep, if at all, how they dole out Medicare and Medicaid funds, whether or not to put lifetime caps onto the policies, which means that if you hit a certain level of use of your coverage, that's it. You're done. That's what a lifetime cap is. The Affordable Care Act took away lifetime caps. Imagine, in my case, I had my 27-month-old daughter was diagnosed with inoperable terminal cancer. Imagine a child that isn't diagnosed with terminal cancer and is diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia, ALL, which is the most common form of childhood cancer. It has a 94% cure rate. The drugs that are being used to treat children with ALL are, in most cases, 30, 40, and 50 years old. They leave lasting health care issues and health issues for cardiovascular systems, child's heart. I mean, you name it. These drugs are not, they're indiscriminate. When they are put into your body, they don't discriminate between healthy cells and cancerous cells. So these are children that, in most cases, 98% of the kids who survive will have an acute lifelong health care issue. Some develop secondary cancers. A lot of kids actually succumb within the 30 years after being labeled a survivor. So imagine a child that is experiencing a diagnosis of ALL, is cured, quote unquote cured, survives 5 years from the time of their diagnosis, and then goes on to experience a lifetime of issues. And you're talking about care in the millions and millions of dollars. Well, if you reach a cap, if you hit the ceiling, that's it. Good luck finding care somewhere else. Good luck finding insurance somewhere else. So whether or not that sticks, nobody knows. Number 4, medical research. Well, moving into the end of President Obama's administration, he initiated the Cancer Moonshot. He initiated the Precision Medicine Initiative. These are two, and the funding into the Brain Project. These are initiatives that took a tremendous amount of money. The Cancer Moonshot, there was $1 billion slated to go into that. Precision Medicine Initiative, I forget what the amount of money that was earmarked for that was, but these were initiatives that were forward-thinking and were seeking to really fast-track medical research. Nobody really knows what's going to happen with the Cancer Moonshot. People are trying to figure that out, but your guess is as good as mine on that. Vice President Biden was put in charge of the Cancer Moonshot, and as of Friday afternoon, he hopped on an Amtrak train up to Delaware and went back home. What our administration now does with the Cancer Moonshot, nobody knows. There was question whether or not the Trump administration would renew or ask for Francis Collins to stay on as the head of the National Institute of Health. Dr. Collins is pretty incredible researcher himself. I've had a number of personal interactions with him and asked him for a number of favors, and he's a very, very amiable individual. And to lose him after a number of years at the helm of the NIH would have been massive. And knowing what would happen with somebody installed as a new director of NIH is anybody's guess. You can see what's happening with the attempt to silence people in the Trump administration from tweeting and from using social media. It doesn't look good in terms of advancing science at this point, but again, nobody really knows. For childhood cancer, which is my main issue, the National Institute of Health, which is the overall umbrella that the National Cancer Institute operates within, has not funded childhood cancer specific research to any great extent. Over the entire budget of the National Cancer Institute, which is about $5.2 billion, childhood cancer gets 4% of that budget. And childhood cancer is the number one cause of death by disease of children in the United States. So what happens to research on the federal level for childhood cancer? I don't know. It's driving people to start to really focus on the private sector, which in some cases isn't that bad because things can often move a little bit quicker on the private sector. But with that said, there should be a combination between public and private entities to try and move things forward. So nobody really knows in terms of medical research either what the tenor of the administration is going to push for. Drug prices. That's an area that Trump has said he wants to try and control drug prices, and he has attacked pharmaceutical companies for outrageous pricing. And with that said, we don't know whether or not he is going to try and create some regulatory framework to try and control drug prices. It seems a bit odd in terms of his business attitude, but I don't know. There's a lot of people that want to see more importation of drugs from Canada and from other countries where the cost of drugs is that much cheaper than it is in the States. So whether or not the administration does anything to try and maintain drug prices or lower them, I don't know. Access to care. This buttresses upon the Affordable Care Act in terms of, in some instances, access to care means, well, are you insured? If you're not insured, how are you going to pay for catastrophic health care? If you have no insurance and you're diagnosed with MS, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, how are you going to get care? You're definitely not going to receive the same quality of care as you would if you have coverage. So, you lose your coverage, that's very concerning. Access to drugs. In terms of access to drugs with respect to the regulatory framework, the Food and Drug Administration is the one that makes decisions with respect to whether a drug is approved for a certain indication or not. If we're talking about cancer, and I'll talk about childhood cancer, that's what I know. Many forms of childhood cancers have no standard of care. And so kids try clinical trials, phase 1 trials, which they're not even looking to see whether the drug's effective. They're looking to see if the drug's going to kill the kid or if it's going to be too toxic or cause issues. Same thing in adult trials. Phase 1 trials are dosing and toxicity determining trials. Phase 2 is when you start looking at, okay, is it effective? Phase 3, it's effective, and you try and create a wider and broader trial so more people can be enrolled and complete all the testing, submit it to the FDA, and the FDA says, okay, drug's approved for pancreatic cancer, or we can use this drug in relapsing remitting MS, whatever it is. If you are someone with a disease that does not have a standard treatment protocol, and there's a drug available that shows promise, you can try and get the drug on compassionate use. What that is that your doctor writes a letter to the FDA and to the drug manufacturer and says, okay, my patient has exhausted all standards of care. My patient needs access to this drug. Try the drug and let us have it. 99.9% of the time, the FDA approves it, and then it goes to the pharmaceutical company, and then it's up to the pharmaceutical company whether or not they provide the drug. Nobody knows what's going to happen if that framework is changed. There are some good changes that are being talked about, and then there are a lot of uncertainties. There are a number of pieces of legislation called Right to Try Acts, which are pending, which a lot of ethicists and a lot of people don't like because it basically takes away a lot of the regulatory framework that keeps tabs of safety issues with drugs. So nobody knows what's going to happen, whether or not drugs will be more available for treatment or less available. And then if you don't have access to care, if you have lifetime caps, if you don't have insurance, then you're going to have to go through significant hoops to even obtain any type of care, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody knows. We don't know what we don't know. So there's a lot of uncertainty, unfortunately. Usually at this point, we should have more information in terms of who's going to fill the roles in terms of the FDA, in terms of, we've got this insurance provision, the Affordable Care Act, which is a massive piece of legislation, which has done a lot of good. It's also driven prices of insurance up in some instances, but more people have care than they did. It could be gone. So, we're all like the woman in the picture. We're all sitting here with our hands in our heads, just waiting for the next tweet or, the next midnight vote. What does it mean? I feel like this is a reiteration of the last slide, so I can just blow through all this very quickly because, again, your guess is as good as mine. I read at least 3 different articles today on what it could mean for insurance with the ACA and what could happen with Medicare and Medicaid. And, if people had to hedge their bets, it looks like it will be something that the states will be left in charge of. But maybe not. I don't know. The one thing that seems certain is that as much as we hear and as much as we see the Senate Republicans and the House Republicans acting quickly to repeal Obamacare, by the same token, you have people that are within the ranks of power that are trying to slow things down and not cause a massive crisis. In terms of research, funding on the federal level has been curious over the last number of years. The Republicans have actually been the ones who have been driving the push to increase the amount of money given to the National Institute of Health. You would think it's the other way around, but it hasn't been. Now, the Republicans have used some specific pieces of legislation to stunt or perform for the cameras to save their seats, but they have actually put a decent amount of funding back into the NIH and into the Department of Defense, which has something called the CDMRP, which is it's a congressionally directed research fund through the Department of Defense, and they've done a lot of breast cancer research, a lot of other disease research as well, and there's a lot of money up for grabs through the DoD. So I don't think anybody really knows at this point, and we probably will not know until we start hitting, maybe next fall, give or take, in terms of how much money will be allocated for federal research. But with that said, for people like myself who do a lot of advocacy work and are pushing for increases in research funding, we always have to be knocking on doors and moving and continuing to pound away. Drug prices I talked about. It would not be a bad thing if we tried to either allow drugs to be imported as long as they met safety profiles, or if there were some type of measures to keep drug prices down. The flip side of that would be that drug companies oftentimes utilize their profits and reinvest in their research and development. And so if you cut drug prices and you cut profits, you're going to lose shareholders, and then the amount of money that's ultimately reinvested goes down. How much time do we have? I'm going through this extremely quickly here, and frankly, again, at the end of this presentation, I don't necessarily know that you're going to walk away with any more knowledge than I have at this point. So if we had the next number of months to sit on the presentation together, maybe we'd have a little bit better of an idea of what's going to happen. What to do? Okay, overall, if it was me, and let me talk about several cases. So I have my own private insurance policy that I pay for, and I get reimbursed from one of my employers by the Max Care Foundation. They write me a check at the end of every month and pay me back for it. I don't know what's going to happen with my policy. I know that my premiums have gone up steadily over the last 2 years as different components of the Affordable Care Act have taken shape. I will be contacting my insurance company and trying to get some type of information from them. If they've prepared any type of press information or any type of policyholder information to give some type of indication as to whether or not policies are going to be impacted, premiums are going to be impacted, the quality of care. I don't know. I don't know what I don't know, but what I can do is start researching and investigating in terms of other options if something happens to my policy. At this point, I don't know what's available. So, trying to, save for a rainy day or save for a bad day it's a struggle. I'm in the nonprofit world, and needless to say, I will not be retiring to the Bahamas. So I'm worried, I'm concerned, and the only thing I can do is continue to read as much as possible and continue to try and seek as much information as possible from my insurance carrier. If you are in one of the exchanges from the Affordable Care Act, what should you do? That's a tough position because you don't know whether or not tomorrow morning when you wake up, whether or not Congress has fully acted and whether or not Trump is going to sign something. I think you need to continue to be as informed as possible. I would contact my Congress people, regardless of whether they're Democrat or Republican, independent, it doesn't matter. Contact them, flood them, call them, email them, doesn't matter. Just continue to express your opinion and what may happen to you or your loved one. It doesn't matter. I think you need to do anything and everything in your power to try and exercise your civic rights to your elected officials and make your voice heard. I think you also should be exploring other potential options. Now that you do have coverage, if for some reason that coverage is dropped, if that insurance goes away, potentially contacting other carriers at this point to see whether or not you can get different coverage that's outside of the exchange. I don't know. They may be putting a freeze on enrollments at this point. Your guess is as good as mine, but I wouldn't sit on my heels. I wouldn't wait for something to happen. I would try and gather as much information as possible and talk to as many people as possible. If you have coverage through your employer, then talk to your human resources people. If it's a small company, talk to the person who administers your benefits and ask them, look, do you have any idea what's going to happen? If they tell you they don't know, ask them if they can keep you informed. Ask them what they're doing to try and find out. Tell them you're worried. Tell them you're concerned. Inaction is not going to get you to the place where you need to get to. And then by the same token, I would explore how you can obtain care should the worst happen. What can you do? Are you eligible for Medicare, Medicaid? What are your options? I think that pretty much covers what I would do, what you should do, and what could you do. Making yourself known to your elected official, though, is something that you can continue to do. And look, these are people, if they're in Congress, if they're a congressperson, they serve 2-year terms. What do they want the most? They want to maintain their job. It's very costly to run a campaign, and every year they have to start gearing up for a campaign. Now, not every single one of them is up for election each time, but with that said, you can make your voice known that you're going to try and get them out of their seat and try and get their whoever's running against them. Senate, they run every 6 years, so and it's staggered. So again, use your voice. Tell them that you're going to do everything in your power to campaign against them, and that's how grassroots efforts get organized, is by people who feel that they need to act for something. Okay. Considerations. We're all surfing on this wave at this point, and I've never surfed, but I've always wanted to. My understanding, to be a good surfer, is you've got to obviously stay in front of the wave and not in back of it or underneath it, because you get pummeled. And I think that's what we all need to do, is just don't wait until the worst happens. be as proactive as possible. Contact your carrier, contact your employer. Information is powerful. Don't go overboard. Not knowing what you don't know. There's only so much time in each day that you can be looking at the possibilities of what's going to happen, and what you can do. And, obviously if you're interacting with public officials, or if you're interacting with your insurance company, keeping them on your good side is also beneficial as well. And finding allies in different places is not as straightforward as, is the person a Republican or a Democrat? Are they conservative, liberal? What are their views? One of the biggest champions for childhood cancer in Congress is Congressman Michael McCall from Texas. He's a Republican. He happens to be, I think, the wealthiest member of Congress, or one of the wealthiest members of Congress. He is one of the co-chairs of the Congressional Childhood Cancer Caucus. He has championed children's causes and childhood cancer more than anybody has in Congress. And he has taken positions which are not typically considered Republican positions. So you never know who's going to be on your side or who you can work with, regardless of whether they're an elected official or in your insurance company or your company. Again, thinking about contingencies and emergency situations, what would you do if you were diagnosed with cancer and you have a lifetime cap, or if you have no coverage at all? I've spoken on other presentations about fundraising and setting up GoFundMe campaigns, or something like GoFundMe, to try and raise money for your care. Nothing is off the table in terms of trying to obtain care. If it's life and death, then you've got to do what you have to within reason, obviously. There's a lot of people that are very worried that if the Affordable Care Act is repealed, that people are not going to have options, and there will be a lot of people that die who otherwise may not have, had they been able to keep their coverage. Again, it's a situation where everybody's guessing at. So you can either put your head in the sand and wait for something horrible to happen, or maybe it's not as bad as it'll be, or you can try and become informed and try and do something about it. And number 5, know where you can turn for help. If something horrible happens, family members, friends, church, synagogue, mosque, doesn't matter. Do you have a network that you can turn to for help? Whether it's for meals, transportation, whether it's raising money to help you get treatment, doesn't matter. Having places that you can turn for assistance is huge. Law schools have legal aid clinics. Now, normally they are, focused on representing indigent people in various situations. They do some criminal representation. Sometimes they do civil representation. But it may not be a bad outlet for seeking legal assistance if you have to, take steps to protect yourself. It doesn't matter. Trying to figure out where to go in case of an emergency is also being proactive. Know what your plan will be ahead of time rather than trying to put the plan together in the worst scenario. Again, it's a lot of information. There's a lot of uncertainty. When I was putting out on my social media channels about this presentation, I basically told people ahead of time, I don't think I really know what I'm talking about, because I don't know that anybody does at this point. But I do know that there is a lot of uncertainty. I do know that there is a lot of fear. And I do know that there's also people that are trading on that uncertainty and fear and trying to further divide everybody and cause panic. So the more we can inform ourselves, the better off we can be, and the better off we can help each other, in case of emergencies. So, I guess if there's anything I can leave everybody with, it's simply that, knowing what's going on is much better than waiting for something poor to happen. So I'm going to stop. Hopefully there's some questions. I'll do my best to answer them. And if I don't have the answer, I'm going to be honest and tell you I don't have the answer, and hopefully we can find the answer. So keep digging. So thanks, everyone. Any questions?
Jonathan?
Yes.
If and when there are changes, as we kind of expect there will be, to the Affordable Care Act, you wouldn't normally expect them to take effect until the fall, though, right? Like open enrollment period, that kind of time frame?
That's a good question. Nobody really knows. And I don't know the answer to that question, whether or not they would take effect immediately and whether insurance coverage would cease immediately or not. I don't think it would. I hope it wouldn't. I hope that there would be some type of period where those who are impacted have the ability to change over to whatever replacement is available. Look, that's the hope, is that there isn't just a wide scale wiping off the books of millions of people from insurance. That would be absolutely catastrophic. It would cost, the estimates are, in the trillions of dollars in terms of what it would do to the economy, to carriers. So, no, I think, in the best world, if there is a repeal and there is a proposal put forth, then hopefully there's a period of time where people can figure out how transitions occur, and whether it's a migration to the states in terms of allowing them to decide how to spend the money from the exchanges, or some other fix. Hopefully, to your point, it's not just immediate.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Jonathan.
Yes.
You spoke about uncertainty and fear. Is there somewhere that, or somehow, that the public can put that same type of fear into our representatives or Congress, whereby, because their health insurance is one that is premium and phenomenal.
Yes.
What type of fear can we put on them if they were put in the same position that they're putting the American public in, as far as their health insurance is concerned?
Mm-hmm.
Give them that same type of medicine that they're handing out to us.
Yeah.
How would we go about doing that? Could it be through a vote?
So, yeah, they, every 2 years, their job is up for re-election. And I know a lot of Republicans that are not a fan of the administration at this point, and are worried about what it's going to do to their job in the next congressional election, which will happen in a year. Basically, everybody's going to start gearing up to running again, or at least the representatives who are up for re-election will start running again. Yes, the fear that we can put into them is that, hey, look, your job is on the line, And that's the most important aspect of their existence, is maintaining their job. And, I got to tell you, if the worst happens, if the Affordable Care Act is repealed and there's no safety net and there's no new legislation enacted that tries to maintain insurance for the people that are being dropped, then there's going to be widespread job loss up on Capitol Hill, and there should be. So, contacting your representative, calling them, trying to schedule appointments with their health policy advisors at their local congressional office where you live, asking for an appointment with your congressperson or your senator or somebody on their staff to go in and talk to them and explain your situation and explain the situation of others that you're familiar with. That is well within your right and your power. If they're not willing to, if they're not giving the answers that will help or that are satisfactory, then you call them up or email them and tell them that, look, you're going to actively campaign for their opponent and they're going to lose their job. That's something that you can do. Contacting the media, and if you have a circumstance that is newsworthy, then that's also something that can help on a personal level as well as an overall level to continue to tell the story. It's very slow. Change on Capitol Hill is very, very slow. Very few bills actually pass because of a lot of the games that get played up on Capitol Hill with various riders being attached to pieces of legislation, and it's not a place that things happen quickly, although things seem to be happening very quickly now. Hopefully, even if your representative is for repealing the Affordable Care Act, hopefully you can at least impart upon them that they need to be careful and that you'd like them to think and put something else into place before it's repealed. So.
But the fact still remains that they're still covered for life because
Yes.
they serve in Congress. It says that they want to repeal the Affordable Care Act. How do we repeal them that they do not get that coverage for life?
You would have to have your congressperson have them introduce a piece of legislation to repeal their care for life, and that would be like committing suicide up there. It's unfortunately not going to happen unless enough people get pissed off and do it. But to your point, why should they get their care for life? If we can't get care, why should they? They oftentimes don't live by the same rules in terms of the amenities that they have that we do. And I got to tell you that doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. I don't see anybody, liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican, independent, I don't see any of them floating bills that would take away their health care for life or cut their salaries, or when the government shuts down and government agencies can't run because there's a stalemate over the budget, I don't see any of them saying, you know what, stop my salary. So yeah, that's a very hard sell.
I know they still get paid,
Yeah, absolutely. So you just got to keep making your voice known.
So when you were talking about how there were drugs in other countries that people would try to get into America, do you know if there's any drugs that people specifically do want that it's like better in that country and they want to bring it to America, but people are just so against importing rather to America?
Yeah, if you look at like the EpiPen, for example, I just saw a comparison of prices, and I think it was either Great Britain or Canada, the cost of the EpiPen, and it was dramatic in terms of the difference of price between what it costs in Canada versus the U.S. So if you just Google it, there's a whole list of comparative drug prices from different sources. Most people look at Canada as the source if we were going to import drugs into. There used to be buses that took senior citizens up to Canada or took senior citizens to Mexico to obtain drugs. That kind of they kind of shut that down or cracked down on that. But I guarantee you that if drug prices raise dramatically, that's going to happen again. You've seen instances where somebody will take over a drug company and jack the price of the drug up thousands of percentage, thousands of percent over what it was. Martin Shkreli did that with the AIDS drug. And he quickly became one of the most hated people in the country. I know the guy who bought the company that was making the drug, and he's a pretty remarkable man in terms of what he's doing with the company and investing money into it to try and bring the cost of their drugs down. But, that's an instance where, it defied logic. Drugs are being made cheaper in India and in Canada, and as long as they meet the safety profile that the FDA has, then if we're truly a free market society, well then, our drug manufacturers manufacturing drugs domestically, if you want to compete, lower the prices, find ways to lower the cost of the drugs in terms of manufacture, and you could actually probably make more money. Just Google comparative drug prices, and you can quickly see how outrageous some of the drug prices are. My understanding is there might be a low-cost EpiPen that is going to start being sold at CVS. So hopefully for people that need EpiPens, that issue is being taken care of. But it's pretty bad. Anyone else? Well, again, I don't know how much you were able to get out of tonight's presentation, because frankly, I don't know how much I know, or I don't know how much any of us knows. But the one thing that I would want to leave you with is that an informed population is a population that's able to act on their own behalf and for their neighbor and for their daughter, themselves. And so don't wait until it's too late to act. Take control of your care by talking to anybody you need to within your network, whether that's your insurance carrier, your doctors, your employer, it doesn't matter. If you're under your parents' health care plan, if you're on your own private plan, just try and find out as much information as possible. And, by all means, try and set up an appointment with your representative or their staff. Most likely you're going to see their staff. You're going to see a junior staff member. But the more people that are knocking on their door and telling them how they feel and explaining the problems, the better off ultimately we're going to be. It's slow, and we're in some interesting times now. And there's a lot of uncertainty to the former certainty that existed. So with that said, I appreciate everybody's time tonight, as always, and thanks for joining. And try and tell your friends to jump on one of these presentations in the near future. And thank you.